Okay, let's see my recording. Yes. All right, now, Merry Christmas. The main reason I'm making this video is to show off my vintage Sputnik lamp. So by the end of the video, I want to talk about Russia and Putin, and I think that Trump will probably be in again 2020. I mean, that's my guess. It'd be kind of unlikely if it didn't happen. The pattern is for the people who actually own the government. This Council of Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, Federal Reserve. Those folks select our presidents, and what they usually been doing is selecting a right-winger for 8 years and then a left-winger for 8 years. And basically they get to build the government from the right for 8 years, and then they build the government from the left for 8 years. But even with Trump in, there's a general Marxist trajectory that hasn't changed. And we haven't changed from this cultural Marxism even with Trump. So I mean, I can't put my faith in this idea that a president is going to actually be able to affect the kind of changes that would make for a government that represents myself and many of my fellow Christians. And I think the solution would be to have a Christian secession and not be part of the United States. Let the United States go down with the Marxists because there's nothing you can do about it if you're part of it. You're only going to be contributing, whether you're contributing from the right or contributing from the left. There's a Marxist trajectory that I don't think that is going to be broken within the system itself, since the system is owned by the Marxists. So 2024, I'll be voting for, I'll be writing in Vladimir Putin for president, and I think he's capable of running both Russia and the United States at the same time. The guy's very capable. I don't think that would be too difficult for him. And the reason I say this is because Putin actually was able to do what no American president, I mean, the last American president that tried it was John F. Kennedy, got his brains blown out. But in effect, Putin threw out his version, the Russian version of the CFR, the Trilateral Commission, and the Federal Reserve. He threw them out of his country successfully without getting his brains blown out. And so somebody like him, I think, could succeed in doing that in the United States. Right now, Russia's a more freedom-loving country, and is certainly more Christian-friendly, and has adopted more values that are consistent with the Christian worldview. So I would be foolish not to vote for Putin. Now, my mom found this at a used bookstore. It's like a compilation of a retro look at an old magazine, a men's magazine from 1951 to 1957. It's the best of gentry. And I thought it was interesting because if I said, well, these cultural magazines, these men magazines and so forth are being published in order to sway public opinion and for the publishers to push the culture in a direction that they see fit. You would call me a conspiracy theorist, perhaps. But I'm going to read what the publisher himself has said. Siegel, and by the way, this is a Jewish-owned publication. Siegel admitted that if only 100,000 men took a liking to the publication and followed its aesthetic of intelligently executed affluence, not only would the magazine be a success, but non-subscribers would pick up on cues set by its select readership and follow suit. Such reasoning may appear elitist at first, but what Siegel knew is that Not every man had the time, the means, or the courage to stand out. But if those few who did could flaunt their individuality with relish and generosity, he could instigate a quiet revolution in our culture. Okay, so there you go. That's what he says. He says that it's a conspiracy to change the culture. And that's his words. I just read them to you. You know what I mean? So I found a couple interesting. My friend gave me this as a speaking of Russia, and Hungary is also one of the world's great nations right now in terms of standing up for freedom and self-determination. It says here, Hungary boast we are a Christian nation. November 28th, 2019, from Breitbart. Thank you, God, for this conference in Hungary, for persecuted Christians, and for the Christian faith of the leaders of Hungary. Bless them and help them. Hungary is holding its second International Conference on Christian Persecution 2019 in Budapest this week to keep a bright light shining on the plight of Christians around the world. Keynote speakers for the event include Hungary's Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, Nigerian Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka, and Georgios III, Patriarch of the Assyrian Church of the East. Tristan Azbej, Hungary's State Secretary for the Aid of Persecuted Christians, and Reverend Joseph Kassab, head of the Evangelical Community of Syria and Lebanon, are also conference speakers. The Orban government has been on the front lines of aid to persecuted Christians around the world, sending financial aid and logistical assistance to so that Christians are not forced to migrate from their lands for economic reasons. This summer, Mr. Azbej lamented a wall of silence that has been erected around the problems of Christian persecution despite the enormity of the problem on a global scale. Speaking at the 2019 Ministerial to Advance Religious Freedom hosted by the U.S. Department in Washington, D.C., Azbej explained why Hungary has focused attention on Christian persecution. My title is State Secretary for Aid of Persecuted Christians. I believe I'm the only governmental official in this world with that title. Azbej began his July 16th address to the ministerial eliciting spontaneous applause. We are a Christian nation. We are proud of that, he said. There are not many European countries where politicians are allowed to say such a thing, which is true. And the funny thing is, the United Nations has that statement of one of the things that they're meant to guarantee is the right of self-determination. So, if a nation wants to be a Christian nation, they should be allowed to do that. But we know that in reality, the United Nations and its ilk, they work against such a thing. They have this this commandment, this rule of law, this ordinance, or whatever you want to call it, that says that unless a nation is Israel, then any such nation must have open borders and allow any group of people who wants to come in and dominate, and that's considered the basic human right or something like this, which is certainly against the biblical model for the world. After all, it's God who invented the nation state, and it's God who destroyed the Tower of Babel, and it's the New World Order and the United States that's rebuilding the Tower of Babel. The United States is really the rebirth of Babel, as far as I'm concerned, ever since the founding FTARDs took away the freedom of self-determination. That's the way I look at it. Okay, here's an article, When Schools Get Real. Okay, this is out of the New York Times. So they basically they went interviewed, how do you connect what you're learning in the classroom with what's going on in the world outside of school? We like they had to say so much that we asked teachers a similar question, and answers poured in. So if if the New York Times likes what they're hearing, then you know basically what this is a gauge to see how well their propaganda is taking root. How well is the agenda that they're setting interpreted by the school system to be the correct interpretation of reality? See, so just like the inhabitants of Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, we seek products to provoke short bursts of satisfaction and often ignore more wholesome alternatives similar to the imaginary civilians in the Brave New World. We are surrounded by consumables that are marketed for being quick, Amazon Prime, faster internet, blah, blah, blah. So this is a kid, Kendall Dunn, 18. So they like this because he misinterpreted what the Brave New World, the message of Brave New World is not anti-consumerism. So they like the fact that he's missed that point. Here's one. Sarah Evener, 16. Why is the Me Too happening now? Why are all these women all of a sudden sharing their stories? These questions seem to puzzle many, yet there is a simple answer. Newton's first law of motion can easily explain the growth of the #MeToo movement. Newton's first law states that an object at rest will remain at rest, and an object in motion will remain motionless, acted upon by an unbalanced force. Well, she goes on to think that the unbalanced force is a grassroots reaction to the election of Trump. Okay, so she's right. It is there is good reason you should be questioning it, but her answer, of course, pleases the New York Times because she gets it wrong. She doesn't realize that it's cultural Marxism that's behind these things. The people that own, for instance, the New York Times newspaper and all the media outlets. Here's a guy, Andrew B. 17. Whether heroes take the form of a mighty Anglo-Saxon warrior like Beowulf or a fierce princess like Wonder Woman, the people who rise up and lead us out of the shadow of death are cultivated by their trials they face and the hope of a brighter future. Their hope of a brighter future that we project upon them. We are often rooted in the injustices we experience. So I thought that was interesting. They allowed that guy to publish it because I think that actually that's the only one there that has a little bit of a truth. I mean, this is almost. I mean, Adolf Hitler was that type of hero. Really, if you know what happened in World War II, I'm surprised he didn't. In fact, that's my note. It reminds me of Adolf Hitler. I'm surprised that he didn't mention Adolf Hitler. Here's one. Abby Van Lonkhuizen, 16. The motivations behind the Chinese Exclusion Act and President Trump's executive order barring people from 7 Muslim countries are shockingly similar. Both were designed to limit the immigration of one particular ethnic group. But unlike the Chinese Exclusion Act, the president's executive order faced harsh criticism and was challenged in court on several occasions. Despite it's too early in the morning here. Despite similarities between the two laws, the American people have learned a lot in the last 100 years. We've learned that immigration doesn't hurt the economy. It might even help. We've learned that true to American beliefs, the color of a person's skin or the religion they practice does not matter. Well, really, we'll see if the religion if the religion you practice doesn't matter, then that shows you that the American system trivializes. It's set up to trivialize a religion, and actually what it does, it makes all other religions bend the knee to humanism. Now, of course, New York Times likes that. In other words, New York Times says, "Oh, look, our brainwashing is is effective. Look what this guy is saying." I think that what we're really learning, in especially in recent times, what I've learned is that before America became a union of states, there was freedom. There was the freedom to allow your religion to dominate your community, so that you could have a mono-religious culture in a particular state. And to me, that's what's important. That's what we lost. It's one of the things we lost when the states were unionized. That's an important freedom that we need to get back to, and the way we're going to do that is by secession movements in the United States. I don't care what your secession movement is based on. I will support it. That's that simple. Okay. Like I remember when Bush was in, there was Vermont had a secession movement. And, there was a website that was trying to coordinate different secession movements, and it was pretty popular when Bush was in with the liberals. I know there was a Vermont secession, but at the same time there was South Carolina, and Vermont and South Carolina wanted to secede for opposite reasons, and I would support both of them. What happened there when Obama came in, then the little liberals dropped out and they started believing in the system again, and so now that Trump got in, then I see it's kicked back to some degree. They're not really, it's not really getting the kind of press. California, for instance, some Californians wanted to see because they don't like Trump, which is fine. I think that people that like Trump and the people that don't like Trump should be living in two different countries. And the fact that they aren't says we're not free as Americans. The idea of American freedom is propaganda. It's made you to stay here and continue to feed the system, so that the ruling class could just keep getting fatter and fatter. And the same thing with the wars. The wars were fought, World War I, World War II. These wars were fought to consolidate power, and the people fighting, the soldiers, were actually fighting for a process that would take away more of their freedom. But they didn't know this. Okay, here's a teacher saying, every year my 8th grade students choose a modern day issue of injustice they would like to learn more about and take action towards solving. This has resulted in everything from Instagram accounts about our society's beauty standards, what our society's beauty standards are. In other words, put fat people on television or whatever, put ugly people on television, kind of, that movement that's going on now. To musical fundraisers for LGBTQ plus rights groups. To creative writing pieces, artwork, and political letters that urge others to help victims of police brutality, mass incarceration, and the school-to-prison pipeline. But notice they're not fighting for the freedom of self-determination that I was talking about, to help people groups secede from the nation. So as far as I'm concerned, whatever he's doing there is a waste of time. Okay, let's see here. Okay, Julie Mann from Queens. My human rights class for high school ESL students have always been built around current events. I never know what I'm going to teach until life happens. Since the new administration took over, our class has been very focused around immigrants' rights, travel bans, ICE raids, and other things. Now, the separation of families. This is the first time we've ever made our own population the focus of the human rights class, and I'm guessing this is going to continue to next year. So here's somebody that bought into hook, line, and sinker the fact that the people who built America need to surrender it to others who are just going to come in and abuse it, and trash it. That's that's your right. Your duty is to walk away from your house and give the keys to some immigrants that just came in, and you can live on the streets. Okay. Okay, Susan Barber from Atlanta. My students would say that one of the best things they did last year was to read Clint Smith's collection of poetry, Counting Descent, then Skype with him when we finish. As a literature teacher, I can choose all types of text to teach reading skills, but I love bringing in modern works and the voices to help students explore current interests and current issues. Many told me that they had never read anything like Counting Descent in school, and it offered them predominantly upper class. It offered them, who were predominantly upper middle class white teenagers, an avenue to consider a different perspective on race and coming of age than what they are typically exposed to in suburban Atlanta. So, in other words, once again, we need to, if you're white, you need to give somebody your car keys and your house keys and walk away and go live on the street. Basically, that's what they really like to see. But people are a little reluctant to do it. But they'll try it. They'll get it. They'll get there. Let me see. My schools consist of 99.9% students of color. It is important to discuss issues surrounding race in the classroom because race will be part of my students' lives forever. Additionally, as high school physics and engineering teacher, I teach about fields dominated by straight white men, and we don't discuss why that came to be. My students may continue to wrongly assume that STEM engineers are not for them. So, we don't discuss why that came to be. That's interesting. I wonder why. I wonder what he's trying to get at there. I guess because if you talked about it, it would force you to cross the path of this kind of IQ realism or something like that. I don't know. Okay. Mark Drago, Somerville, Massachusetts. Mathematics can help us understand the world around us. For this coming school year, I plan on addressing the current issue of higher minimum summer temperature in cities like Burlington, Vermont. Together, we'll explore data on NOAA website and draw our own conclusions. So they're gonna look at these temperature charts and decide that and somehow they're not going to look at the science, though. They're not going to bother looking at the fact that carbon in trace amounts, and you could really probably release carbon at 100 times the rate, and it still wouldn't be harmful. It's a healthy element, and it's necessary for the symbiotic ecosystem. So, and it doesn't block the sun. It doesn't. I should say it does. It just like all greenhouse gases, they actually block the sun, lower the temperature. The idea we're supposed to think it traps the fast-moving molecules underneath of the greenhouse gas cover, which is not. That's not good science. Elizabeth Meskowitz, Ridgeville, Connecticut. Last year, my middle school students had to write speeches on topics they were passionate about and that they could tie to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, then deliver them to an audience of around 100 made up of parents and school staff. They are finding their place in the world. And this project essentially said to them, your opinions are important and you deserve to be heard. Well, they're really not finding their, well, they're, in a sense, they're taking their place that was assigned to them as people that need to accept the fact that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is the only option. That in effect, really, the Constitution and Bill of Rights are two of the things that take away their freedom of self-determination. So that's what they should be exploring. That. Now, this is kind of interesting. This was New York Times. A Norwegian valley struggles for cultural survival. And surprisingly, it was a little more balanced than what I'm used to from New York Times. It wasn't saying. Although, I mean, the conclusion is they have to change. These days, cultural survival is on everyone's mind. They speak of taking care of the customs and finding ways to keep them relevant in the digital era. There are multi-pronged efforts to strengthen the arts, teaching STEV in schools, organizing pop-up concerts to find audiences in unexpected places, creating irreverent Facebook pages that mix the tradition and the contemporary. At the same time, the older generation underscores the urgency of keeping their youth engaged and employed at a time when the internet and urban jobs are tugging them away. The result is that the historically insular valley is now opening itself to visitors, recognizing that community survival depends on diversifying its economic base and sharing Setestel's natural beauty and cultural wealth with outsiders. We have a problem. The youth are leaving and not enough are coming back, said Lev Reg Langarek, the mayor of Bigland, who added that tourism is important, but economic diversity is essential. If you take an education you want to work in your field, what will help, he said, are some of the very changes that also threaten traditional culture and an improved highway and widespread internet access. So, it's one of these situations where, I mean, I guess they could sort of be more like, the Amish do the same thing. The Amish also, they have a heavy tourist industry, and, they're keeping their old ways to some degree. I don't know, you have to, I think that if you're going to maintain that kind of tradition, I mean, you have to have just a lower standard of living, whatever you can sustain on that kind of thing, and that's your trade-off. But I don't think that's as important. That's not as important as your values, in terms of your moral values. I think that's what really you can be modernized and maintain, a Christian moral values. Or in the case of like the Red Ice crowd, you can maintain your pagan moral values. Although pagan, the thing is about paganism is it has a spectrum of values that often would clash with Christianity, and I understand for the most part the kind of paganism that Red Ice is promoting is compatible with Christianity. Okay, now this was interesting. This is an article. Speaking of uninformed bigots. Okay, so this is there's a book on progressive Islam and the Quran there, and this is an author, an American Muslim author. Book Progressive Muslim. Basically, I guess I'll read the article and then I don't know if I'll stop and go or just read it. I guess I'll stop and go. That's the best way to do it. So basically what happened was this newspaper had an opinion piece from somebody who was warning against the views of Islam and how they're incompatible with the West. And And so they gave this guy opportunity to rebut and, give his side of the story. Now, the thing is, in Islamic religion, and I studied Islam quite a bit. I had debated Islamic leaders in the Philadelphia area in public forums and in mosques and so forth. And I'm familiar with the content of the Quran and the Hadith and so forth. So what happens, here's what you need to know. And I'll give you this beforehand, so when I read the article, you'll be able to catch the drift. Okay, so what happens in Islam is that when Muhammad first started out, he got kicked out of Mecca, and he went back to Medina and got built up military strength and went back and conquered Mecca. And during the early days, he saw that it was tactful to be more friendly. It was a tactic to be more accepting and compatible with particularly Christian and Jews, but that wasn't the only, and of course the other religious beliefs in the area of the Mecca. One of the things that was happening is he and you can pick this all up because if you're familiar with the Quran, it's very bizarre. It's kind of arbitrarily arranged from the longest verse to the shortest. So everything has to be reorganized in your mind and fit into the actual history. So you can make a chronological narrative. And what you come up with is Muhammad had assumed that his revelations were consistent with the Old New Testament of the Jews and the Christians. And I think that he recklessly made that assumption because he wasn't afraid of being checked out or verified or corroborated because his audience was all illiterate. Him himself was illiterate. And so he really wasn't familiar with the content of those other scriptures were. So it was easy for him to push this idea that he was going to be consistent. That's a theme that's emphasized throughout the Quran, is that Muhammad is consistent with the prophets that came before him, and the list of prophets are the Jewish prophets of the Old Testament and Jesus and the disciples. And there was a point where he even said, if he was talking to Arabs, for instance, and they had questions about is this really what the Old Testament and the New Testament say, he would say, well, look, if you got questions, just ask the Jews or the Christians. There's actually a verse in the Quran that says that if you doubt what I'm saying, just verify it with the people of the book, namely the Jews and the Christians, the people of the Bible. And I don't have that verse right in front of me. I could look it up. I do have some verses right in front of me here. There's a Quran browser. It's called Yet Another Quran Browser. That if you're interested in finding a passage in the Quran, is very useful because you can get pretty close. And if you click all versions, you can hone in on the context pretty quickly. At any rate, so Muhammad's making this assumption, and he wasn't really too afraid that he would be found out because he didn't really know. Eventually, what happens is and there's a passage in the Quran that covers this event where he eventually had his audience with literate Jews and literate Christians, ones who in fact could read the scriptures. And in the process, of course, they begin to identify areas where what the Bible said and what Muhammad said contradicted. And so then Muhammad, all of a sudden, he changed his tune, and first thing he did was accuse them of reading what wasn't there. I mean, how do you verify? It's like, if you're talking to, an advanced chemist or something like that, it'd be very easy for them to deceive you because you're not familiar with the territory. So of course you say, well, they're reading what's not there, and then you get passages like this. I want to read this surah. Okay, Surah 5, ayat 51. All right. You who believe, do not take the Jews and Christians for friends. They are friends with each other, and whoever among them you takes them for a friend, then surely he is one of them. Surely Allah does not guide the unjust people. So you see, he's that's in the Quran. So you see what happened there. He says, you better keep my followers away from these Jews and Christians because they're a liability. I'm going to be exposed, and so let's just demonize Jews and Christians from this point forward. That's the sort of thing that happens. And so what happens now, you take a guy like this here, this guy that wrote this Progressive Muslims, Omar Ackerson, and what he'll do is he'll select the passages from the Quran that from the early period when Muhammad had to be friendly with the Jews and Christians before, and he doesn't select any of the passages like the ones I just read. So says, you would expect to read false claims and hateful rhetoric in the dark recesses of the internet. For example, you would not feel the least bit surprised if an ignorant bigot posted a 1,454-word rant against Islam in the comments section of Jihad Watch or some other website dedicated to anti-Muslim bigotry. But you might be surprised, maybe even shocked, to learn that the Trentonian printed such bigotry on December 22nd in a commentary titled, quite ironically, Speaking of Hatred. Over the course of 1,454 words, columnist David Nace falsely claims that Islam is an inherently and uniquely anti-Semitic religion, hence why peace between Israelis and Palestinians is impossible. In support of his theory, Mr. Nace cites current events, the views of notorious Islamophobe Robert Spencer, and a series of negative statements about Jews that he attributes to the Quran. There's just one problem with all this. Mr. Nace has no idea what he's talking about. Let's start with the man Mr. Nace cites as the primary source for his views. Robert Spencer founded the aforementioned website Jihad Watch. A man is designated as an anti-Muslim extremist by Southern Poverty Law Center. Well, if you're designated anything by the Southern Poverty Law Center, then you're probably whatever they're saying about you is not true because they're notorious liars. You see, but it's interesting how this Muslim who's going to try to deceive you into thinking that Islam is a religion of peace is friends with the Southern Poverty Law Center because you need deceivers. The Quran even and the Islamic traditions allow for Muslims to lie to non-Muslims, to advance their cause. Okay, I'm going to just read one of the examples because it's basically the same thing. He gives like maybe 5 different examples. Mr. Nace claims that the Quran and chapter 3, verse 67 states, David and Jesus cursed Jews and unbelievers. Here's what the verse actually says. Abraham was neither a Jew nor a Christian, but was a monotheist submitting to God, and he was not of the polytheists. So perhaps Nace was attempting to reference chapter 5, verse 78, which states, Curses were pronounced on those among the children of Israel who rejected faith by the tongue of David and of Jesus, the son of Mary, because they disobeyed and persisted in excesses. Okay. Let's check another citation. Okay. Jews take other people's wealth. So, okay, this is the whole thing about usury. Here's what that verse actually says, and for the taking usury, although they were forbidden it, and for their consuming people's wealth dishonestly, we have prepared for the faithless among them a painful torment. The next verse reads, but those among them firmly rooted in the knowledge, and the believers believe in what was revealed to you, and in what was revealed before you, and the observers of prayers and the givers of charity, and the believers of God in the last day, upon these will be shown immense reward. So, I mean, he's just pointing out this guy Neeson, and I think he's the Muslim correct here, that he was twisting the meanings of these verses, but he didn't need to do that. He needed to select the right verses. All you need to do is select the verses like I just read about take no Jews or Christian your friends. There are the verses in there, but you got to get them from the right period. I think that the main issue here is that there are irreconcilable differences between Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and each person is going to have an opinion, and it's up to everybody else to look into it and see who's being accurate and who's being deceptive. Okay. Furthermore, a significant number of Palestinians are Christians. Do they too object to Israeli military occupation because of the Quran? Bottom line, Mr. Neese has no idea what he's talking about. Okay. So that's basically what you need to know about Islam, is that the way the Quran is written, you could just select the verses you need to at the time to deceive whoever you need to deceive at the time, or you can select the verses to show actually what's really going on, the truth about it. It's interesting. I was watching some Red Ice, and by the way, I'm a big fan of the Red Ice TV and radio and so forth, and I support them, and for the most part, on the same page. Now, when they first came out with the Weekend Warrior program, which you can get if you're a subscriber, at first I thought, well, this kind of sensationalism, it kind of reminded me of InfoWars or something, and I didn't pay too much attention to it, but I've been since going over and listening to all of them, and they're packed with incredible amounts of information in a short period of time, of great exposés. There's some of the stuff is a little, I don't know, expositionalist or something, but for the most part, I mean, it's really useful information. Well, they were talking about, there was this saying going around that the Jewish population comes in two flavors. Okay, I mean, unless you're Christian. If you're a Christian Jew, then there's three flavors. But even then, even if you're a Christian Jew, I think that you're probably going to take one of those flavors, or you might have a mixture of them, and they are ethno-state Israeli Zionists, and that's a broad spectrum too. I mean, within that category, you can go everywhere from somebody who just wants all Israelis to live in Israel, or you can go to one who just likes the idea of a ethno-state for Israel, but they still want the Jews to control everybody else's government and banking system and so forth, like we have today. And then there's the Jew who hates the idea of Israel because it flies in the face of this idea that there should be this sort of globalism, open society globalism, and so forth. And because they're doing quite well with the open society globalism, it's very easy for them to rise to the top and control things and so forth. And so, there's money to be made, more money to be made in a system of open societies. And plus, I think that, see, one of the things that bother me about this, the Jewish question, is that the vast majority of Jewish people support the Marxist ideology, and they support the war on whites, and they support the replacement of whites in their own countries, and they support not allowing people to have self-determination. And to me, that's a really huge problem. That's a really big problem, and it goes against the Bible, and it goes against everything decent and loving in the world. The loving thing to do is allow people the freedom of association, disassociation, and so forth. And the fact that the majority of Jews are against that is disheartening. It's very difficult to be friendly and supportive of the Jewish culture if the culture is one that seeks your own destruction. I mean, that's why should I do that? So the other thing is I do support Israel. Okay, so I fall on the side of somebody who supports Israel. I like the idea of the Jews having their own ethnic state, but mostly because it's biblically correct. It's scriptural, and this is where we really clash with Red Ice. Red Ice. Their view of the Bible is that it's just like any other mythology, and that it's not, there's not like a historical veracity to it, and it's not, the reason I believe in the Bible is because I believe that it can stand the scrutiny of the historian, and it's factually accurate, and the accuracy, especially as it pertains to prophecy, for instance, it proves that it's from a supernatural source. And so, even though I don't understand everything, I don't understand everything Jesus said, but that's where faith comes in, because you trust that He's been right about these other things, that He's going to be right about the more difficult questions as well, and that's where this comes in. Now, I think that. I think that the whites, the Europeans, the however you want to designate the Caucasian people, they should be behind the model of Israel, and they should ask the Israelis to support the Caucasian cause of having an ethnic state, for instance. That should be demanded. That should be demanded of anybody who's Jewish, which other flavor they are. That should be demanded of everybody. That everybody should respect this freedom of self-determination and inclusion and exclusion, making their own nations. I would invite Netanyahu to come and speak for your cause. Say, hey, look, we're supporting your right to an ethnic state. We would like you to return the favor. This is something I think Trump should have done. When Trump should have traded Trump should have traded his agreements, for instance, to move the capital to Jerusalem, in exchange for Israel to take our most notorious and hurtful Jews, like people like Henry Kissinger and George Soros, could have been traded for that perk, and the other perks that America has given our foreign policy should be integrated with the expulsion of the Jewish element that's trying to destroy us. You say, okay, well, you want your support in Gaza Strip here. You got to take this Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and the Federal Reserve, and get them out of here, and we'll start our own banking and our own foreign policy and so forth. And that's how it should be. That's how we should proceed forward. And that's why I'm saying I'm voting for Putin, and that's why I got my Sputnik lamp, because Putin succeeded to do that in Russia, and I think he could do it for us too. So, that's one immigrant that I would welcome here. Let's, remember when Obama and all this thing, well, we don't care, you don't have to be born in America, blah, 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 good. I'm all for that. If you're competent to get, if you're somebody who's competent to get rid of the Council of Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, the Federal Reserve, I don't care where you were born, come on over and take charge. And so I'm already planning, I'm not going to do 2020 because, like I said, I think Trump is going to, they're going to keep him in anyways. But 2024, I'm going to make a big political poster and sign out and put it out in front of my house, and Putin 2024. I guess you could say make America goy again or something like that. And I'm thinking that I was telling everybody, I think, if Trump follows Obama, and considering the fact that, these presidents are just selected, they're not elected, if Trump follows Obama, who follows Trump? And I'm thinking it might be RuPaul, somebody like that, some flashy drag queen or something that could be our next president, because they're swinging, these swings from the left to the right are, trying to make them more drastic and so forth. So I could see, that, America supporting, like very similar to what Berlin before World War II, where it was the why not have RuPaul and Miley Cyrus, who could be the vice president, something like that, where America is just really the leading edge of Sodom and Gomorrah, and I think that's where we're heading. That's the Marxist agenda, and so I don't see how I'm supposed to think as a Christian that I'm being represented. I'm being represented. I'm getting the kind of government I want when is the whole thing's heading towards Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't understand how I'm supposed to just sit back and accept that and think, oh, okay, this is fine. That's they're taking care of me. I'm being represented. This is really a Christian nation. So I think that my one of the main things I've been doing here with my YouTube channel is trying to encourage Christians to understand that open society is evil, it goes against God, and that the freedom, if you want to stand up for human rights, it should be the right to associate and disassociate. After all, if you read Jesus correctly, and especially if you look at his high priestly prayer in John chapter 17, for instance, he's very much a separatist. That's the whole point. That's really the whole point. Christianity is a very separatist religion, and as Christians, we should support and promote systems that allow for separatism, and that's the Christian, that's the Jesus way of doing things. So now I understand that what happens is, like, for instance, when God needs something done, like with the Israelites, he would disperse them around the world. Now, I think it's time he's collecting them back, and I think that what's going to happen is this information that World War I and World War II and 9/11 were all orchestrated by this Jewish factor, that there is going to be a renewed effort to expel the Jews. I think that that's coming, and it's going to fulfill prophecy. You want to talk about fulfilling prophecy? That's one of the things that that's one of the ways of fulfilling prophecy. And I'm not promoting this idea because I hate Jews or anything like that. I'm just saying that this is the way reality works. God doesn't just say, well, whatever the Jews does, is all right. The Bible would be a lot less thick if you took out all the passages where God was angry at the Jews, and the prophecy says it's going to happen again. And I'm just on the side of truth. That's why I'm saying these things. I'm all about the truth. I don't have any personal animosity or hatred for anybody. Just saying, that the truth is that if there's these evil people that have infiltrated Western society for the purpose of starting these wars where millions and millions of people are killed, like the Bolshevik Revolution, for instance, even before World War I, or around the time of World War I, then this is evil, and evil should be addressed. And I think that God is allowing this information to come forward for these purposes. And so that's what's happening. This is like you could put your head in the sand and just pretend that none of this is important, or it's not really happening, or blah blah blah. But I'm the kind of person that I want to know what's going on. I want to know, like Jesus said, you got to watch and be aware of the times we're living in and so forth, and see what's going on in the prophetic calendar, so to speak. So I don't take the side of the Christians who think that Jews can do no wrong, because Jesus didn't think that. Jesus certainly didn't think Jews were good. That's how he got crucified, by pointing out and challenging their control. That's what's happening now in the world. It's not about hating. It's not being anti-Semitic or anything like that. If you're going to say that any criticism of the Jews could arrange for the death of hundreds of millions of people, and then say that's anti-Semitic, even though it happened, you know what I mean? That's why I was I don't know what the word is, dumbfounded when they started calling 9/11 investigation anti-Semitic, because it's like, pay no attention to the Jewish man behind the curtain. You're not going to find God or Jesus saying, you got to let the Jews get away with murder. It's not, it's not, neither one of those, neither God nor his Father, Jesus or his Father, God, took that point of view. They were always willing to point out the evil. And look, Jesus even said, because they didn't recognize him as the Messiah, he's going to see to it, from controlling the forces of the Roman army, that the temple is destroyed and Israel is uprooted and so forth. And it was Jesus doing that. So that would make Jesus anti-Semitic. And the thing is, if that's the definition, anti-Semitic, then being anti-Semitic is not a bad thing. It's a good thing, because Jesus was anti-Semitic. You see what I mean? And so anybody, if pointing out evil makes you anti-Semitic, then anti-Semitic is a good thing. It's not something you got to run from or hide from or be ashamed of. Because basically, what you're really on the side of truth. You're not actually against Jews. What you're against is evildoers, and if they put themselves in that place, then that's not it's not our fault for pointing it out. And I think that, I have a reasoned, civilized tone in my approach to these things. I'm not calling for violence and random hatred or anything like that. I'm just calling for, what do you do when you make these discoveries and realize, for instance, with the Federal Reserve System, you are working about 4 months out of the year just to enrich the trillionaires. And the country could operate with its own monetary system and its own control of the money system. They could operate, and you'd probably only have to work 1 month a year to pay your taxes. Those kinds of things. I mean, that should concern you. I would rather keep 5 months of my taxes and rather enrich the trillionaires. And that's really the kind of thing that's going on. And my advice to my Jewish friends is, try to make sure you get on the right side of this. Jesus and the apostles were on the right side of history then, and it cost them dearly. In terms of temporal life. Their temporal life was terminated, but their eternal life had begun. And I'm using that in sort of a more literal sense. I know that I would get into arguments with my fellow Christians about the definition of eternal life having begun when you accept Jesus, and I agree with that. But there is this there is the physical being, and then there's the supernatural being. Supernatural, not less physical, just a physics that resides in extra dimensions, and that's why materialist has a difficult time with it. And the reason I'm not a scientific materialist is because I think creation itself just requires a supernatural pre-existence. And so, it's the gate's wide open, the window's wide open for seeking a more a supernatural nature of reality. So there you go. There's my Christmas present to the world. Merry Christmas, and maybe I'll see you again on Happy New Year's. Thanks for watching. By the way, remember LBRY, the library channel, the library video hosting website. It's LBRY. That's it. And you could type in, what you do is you type in love and division, all one word, no caps. And it'll take you to options of channels on LBRY. And I'm one of the first ones to come up. And you'll see me. It has the what looks like a Confederate flag. Instead of stars, it has hearts. And it says love and division. And so that's where I'm going to be going. If I get kicked off of YouTube, I'll just be posting them directly there. I posted some I'm going to start posting stuff directly there as well, not just, on YouTube, because whatever I put on YouTube is, mirrored over there automatically. But so that's just, prepare yourselves for that exodus from YouTube, and I'm going there because I can't get on BitChute. BitChute is like an exclusive club, and it's not really open to anybody. Even YouTube, when it first started, was open to anybody. It was a much more friendly. Even now, if I'm going to say who's more friendly to me, YouTube or BitChute, YouTube is. YouTube still allows me to, even though I'm shadow banned, and I got almost no exposure. they still allow me to put stuff up on their channel. I mean, BitChute I can't get on BitChute. You have to have this reference number. I don't have one, and so that's all there is to it. That's why I'm going to LBRY library. So that's my story. I'm not. You know, I'm going to go there anyway. So, all right. See you later.